Hello, everyone. Thanks for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with.
How's it going? Al Spader, also known as GM Admiral on all the socials, here to chat about my newest RPG.
Yes, which is very interesting. I'll be honest. I would have not guessed this would have come from you. Not so soon. I mean, we all know you from your work in the Star Trek role playing game with Modiphius, and then recently we talked about your Sentience RPG about being living robots and trying to grasp what it means to be alive, and then suddenly, wham! This really like intriguing fantasy setting. For anyone that's not familiar with Once Upon, how would you describe this role playing game?
So we call it a storybook role playing game. We want to take into consideration all the stories that we read as children growing up, and even some that we read now. And the whole point of the book is that all the imagination of kids and adults that are reading stories has power, and that power manifests in a realm known as Imaginara. And this is our kind of uh, our way of sharing what happens in that collective amalgamation of everybody's imagination.
It reminds me at times of like what if Never Ending Story
Mhm.
were to flesh out its lore some more.
Yeah, actually,
Um,
that actually was at the forefront of my mind as I was writing a lot of the stuff in here. It was Neverending Story had a really great concept, but it didn't really build out like an overarching story, a lore, really. And I wanted to make sure that that lore was tied to Imaginara.
yeah, and it's fascinating that in modern like pop culture and modern mythology in a sense that we're re-exploring these fairy tales. Like we sometimes see them pop up over and over again, like fables
Hmm.
that was published by DC some time ago. Why do you think that is? What is it about this world, this fairy tale world that we're so, even as adults, we're still fascinated by it?
I mean, I think that in our nature, our brains, as they're developing, right, we hear these stories at very critical times in our lives. And we create attachments to these characters and to these stories and just to the basic plot of the hero's journey. And I think that's innate in our brains as we get older. And it's especially there, like for people that like to create and play games and such, right? And so, like, it's like when we talk about escapism, sometimes we escape to what's the most familiar to us, right? And we might not remember word for word what happened in a Dr. Seuss book, but all of a sudden we're reading and we come across one quote from Dr. Seuss and you're like, "Oh, I remember that as a kid." You know what I mean? So like I think that all this stuff as our brains are growing, it just gets embedded. And I think it's like us gamers who can really access that information and do cool stuff with it.
Before we get into the details about this book, let me ask first, where did the inspiration to create this come from?
As a game designer, you always want to kind of create your own role playing system. And so I had one that I was working on with friends 15 years ago when we were roommates together that never came to fruition using a D12 pool. And I'm like, someday I'm going to go back to that and I'm going to make it work. Even before I was working on Sentience, I was trying to flesh out this concept of this D12 system. Like when I started getting something that I thought was going to work, I said, okay, well, what's my next step going to be? What's the niche that I want to fill? And it occurred to me that in the current like uh, setting of role playing games, almost every single storybook, fairy tale type role playing game is like dark and grim, and the world has come to an end, and all that's got left is these fairy tales. And I kind of wanted to try to promote a more positive and enlightening role playing experience. Not that there's anything wrong with role playing grim dark or anything like that. I wanted to provide an option for people that wanted to try something different.
Hmm.
And that's where Once Upon developed. And you mentioned Fables, the comic book. This is very much inspired by Fables, the
Hmm.
comic book, right? Because if you think about Fables, the comic book, those are the Fable characters in the real world, and the belief powers them. It's kind of like a flip flop of what we're doing here.
Mm. And you're right. Other adaptations of fairy tales in the modern setting or reinterpretations tend to have a dark slant to it, but this book doesn't really. I wouldn't say it's well. There is danger definitely,
And
but I
there's
wouldn't.
darkness.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it's uh, what would be the term? Like it's just like vertigo. I guess the best way I could explain vertical if you read vertical
Sure.
comics, like vertical style. No, this is more. Um, I feel like it could be Black Cauldron. I don't know if you
Sure.
remember.
Yep.
Yeah, like yeah, there's tinges of darkness, but there's also a lot of light, a lot of hope. Um, but um, but yeah, let's talk about this. So, um, what can you be in Imaginara?
So uh, the whole concept of Imaginara is storytelling, right? So whatever stories you can tell can show up in Imaginara. So we have lots of different roles that people can play. For example, you might be someone who was cursed by a witch. And we talk about that archetype of being cursed and what type of stories might go along with that. There's the displaced, right? When we think about Dorothy Gale or the kids from Lions and the Witch and the Wardrobe, those kids were teleported to a different place. And that can kind of happen. You might be somebody from the real world that all of a sudden exists in Imaginara. And so I believe that we have 8 or 9 archetypes, and we have 6 pre-generated characters, each one being a different one of those archetypes.
Hmm. And when it comes to like characters can you be like anthropomorphic, like like
Mhm.
creatures or
Yeah.
scarecrows? Um,
Yeah, so you can whatever you can imagine, you can role play. So like we tried to show that in our pre-generated characters, right? There's one that's a giant gingerbread bear. There's one that's a cranky old frog, who's like a politician. There's one that's a four-legged dog who is lost from the real world, um, and then we've got like a marionette doll. So there's like lots of different ideas that you can come up with, and the archetype is kind of like dictates what story goes along with you, but who you are, like let's say you play the four-legged dog, there's something called plot devices that are attached to your character, and some of those are based off of your physical body. So like a dog has an enhanced sense of smell, or maybe it's close to the ground, things like that. A frog can jump really far. So when you have those plot devices come into play, you actually start adding dice to pools and such.
the rules for this game, and now this is not a Modifius product. This is its
It is
own
not.
system.
This is a Yellow Hand product. The Yellow Hand is a little conglomerate of game designers who work together. We got like 5 or 6 different people that helped us finish this off and get it over the finish line. Jay Sedelius did all of the layout and the art direction. The cover here is done by a gentleman by the name of Katovic. He lives out in Romania. So it's really a lot of people came together to make this book look
Mm.
good.
And yeah, and I have to say the artwork for this is pretty amazing. Yellow Hand has really impressed me as a. I mean, they just recently been putting out books, but everything they put out has such really good, well designed ideas.
So the actual art page to page is from a gentleman by the name of Arthur Rackham, and he actually did fairy tale art at the turn of the century, from the 1800s to the 1900s. He actually illustrated the original Wizard of Oz books, and what's awesome is his work is all public domain. So we give him a ton of credit in the book, and at the same time, we saved a little bit of money on budget, because we were able to use his art. Now we did pay a couple of artists to help us with our pre-generated characters, with the cover and things like that, just to fill in holes. But yeah, a majority of the art in there is from Arthur Rackham, and public domain fairy tale art. You can't argue with that.
Hmm. And what are the who are the antagonists in this game? Is it's like how what tools do you have here to set things up for game masters?
Sure. So, in the back of the book, there's an adventure design section. If you're running out of ideas, you don't know what story you want to tell, you can just roll d12s on random tables to develop that. The antagonists, there are four tiers of antagonists. You got minions, lackeys, and then you get into your villains and your arch villains. Uh, the villains are, it's pretty standard. Like when you go on an adventure, someone that's manipulating things or greedy or something like that. Arch villains are like world ending type bad guys. You really probably shouldn't go deal with one while you are, just starting off as an adventurer, or until you've built enough belief uh, from your readers. But yeah, and we go over how to build each of those so you can create your own. And there's a pretty good chunk of them in there for you as well.
Hmm. What about the setting ideas? I mean, fairy tales. There's so many from Oz to Wonderland.
Yeah.
Um,
So
the,
so we did when we started designing the map, we came up with a bunch of different ideas, and we said, "All right, well, this main continent, we're going to call it just the realms, because there's a lot of different kingdoms in the realms." And I tried really hard not to specifically pull exactly Cinderella, whatever her kingdom is called, or Moana's kingdom, or anything like that. But there are little bits and pieces. They're more like amalgamations of so like there's a kingdom that wears glass shoes, for example, right? And so it's like kind of little calling out to Cinderella. But what we did on the map is we left a lot of empty, like we put points on the map, but we didn't call them anything, so that GMs can create literally anything from any story that they've experienced or that they have a connection with. Then we go into the legendary lands. The legendary lands are basically the public domain lands that are out there that we can use. So Brobdingnag, Lilliput, Wonderland, Oz, Neverland. We even went in there and did an Arthurian one. And so those are like the concept is us as readers have really solidified those stories into a singular vision, and something like movies have helped us with that. And so they exist as they truly are in Imaginara. And then the third tier of what you can be is what's called, we're calling them the outward realms. And there's no real description of the outward realms in this book. We are planning it on a future book. But these are like your more mystical realms that maybe appear or disappear. They can exist anywhere. Some of them are really hard to get to. So, like we imagined the Cloud Kingdom, where Jack and the Beanstalk climbs to. That's an outward realm, right? Because you have to do something special to get to it, and so on and so forth.
the setting is fluid enough so you could create your own setting, but you do
Hmm.
have resources here like maps
Yeah,
and ideas, so that if a game master can't um, create have time to create something, there's here's stuff here that you can just put together
right.
real fast.
So like there is a section in there on how to design your own your own kingdom if you would like. But then I think we provide almost 20 kingdoms in the book, and it's like far reaching. Like Symphonia is the anthropomorphic instruments, musical instruments. We've got Mongralia, which is anthropomorphic dogs. So there is a lot of different kingdoms in here that you can use, or you can add your particular kingdom that you create. Maybe it lies between two of these different regions.
The tone of this, what is this? Would you say this is could anyone can play this? Would you say it's more for adults, maybe, or maybe more meant for kids? How would
So
you
I mean, I wrote it with adults in mind, and adults are really just big kids, so they can have a lot of fun with it. I do think it's very easy to adapt to a kids game, um, and the big thing here is there's this like dark force called the gloom, and the gloom is basically this driving force to make the readers forget about you as a character. Okay, because remember, you're playing a character in a story that someone is reading, and so throughout the game, as you do cool stuff or as you do awesome stuff for your character, the readers start building belief in you, and as that belief builds, you get to add more dice to your pool. You get to do more cool stuff. Uh, Whereas the opposite of, if you just sit around and don't try to help people, you don't try to do anything to save people, the gloom kind of starts like pulling at you, pulling away, and eventually you can become what we call forgotten, and you're basically like these zombies controlled by this dark force, and that force of darkness can be scary, especially if you're dealing with like little kids. Though I would argue that the idea of becoming forgotten is probably beyond like what a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old are really going to understand, and whatnot. But yeah, so I think if you want to adapt it to kids, you might want to just push the gloom off to the side a little bit, and maybe talk about the darkness a little bit, but don't get into the whole concept of being forgotten, because I don't think they're going to understand it anyways.
Mm. So it reminds me a little bit of the nothing in
Hmm.
Neverending Story.
Well, it's just like you said, it's never ending story, but with lore filled in, right? The
Mm.
nothing was just it was just there. There was no reason for it. Nobody created it. There was no real story behind it, and that's why I wanted to put this story of the into the gloom, right, and make it part of the game.
Mm. So it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you can adapt or change the tone a bit, so it could be this game could be more like Narnia if you
Hmm.
choose it to be, or it could be like Five Nights at Freddy's in some ways
Yeah,
at that level.
yeah, you could do Middle Earth. You could do, Studio Ghibli stuff. Like you could do a lot of different things in this. And I would argue that in the realms of Imaginara, all these places exist because again, they're stories that we've read or interacted with, and our imagination has sent them into this realm.
Hmm. You might have mentioned this already, but what dice do you use for this game?
So this is a D12 pool system, and your characters have what we call competencies, which are their skills. Each competency has 3 ranks, and then you have your methods, and your methods are basically how you do things. Because this is a literary type game, your methods are adverbs, and your competencies are verbs, right? So I want to jump boldly. Uh, you need to describe to me what that looks like. And so if you say, well, I'm going to just close my eyes and leap, okay, you're jumping boldly. And if you say to me, well, I want to break a branch off and do a pole vault over this crevasse. Well, now you're jumping creatively. That probably isn't boldly, right? And so those methods determine how many d12s you roll in a pool. You need a 12 for a success. However, if you have training in your competencies, that lowers the threshold that you need in order to get a success on the dice. And so, if you have 2 levels of training, that means you roll your pool of dice. Anything that's a 10 or higher counts as a success.
So this book is about a little over 132 pages,
Hmm.
and it's you have your character section, core rules section, storytelling section, um, the adventure section. Now in role playing books, especially new ones that have their own rule system, to me the adventure section is very important because that gives me more of a template of an idea of how the creator of the book thinks the game should be run. Like it's kind of like the idea of like the beats of how to make this feel
Yep.
different from other role playing games and so forth. So let's talk a little bit about adventures real fast here.
Okay.
Is it do you have one adventure or a long one campaign? What do you
Yep.
have to offer here?
So this book has one intro adventure. It is called A Touch of Silver. It is 3 chapters long, and each chapter has multiple scenes. And it's meant to be played in a 2-hour session. And on top of that, we also have probably 2 dozen what we call what do we call 'em? Oh, prompts. And prompts are basically half a page story ideas for you to expand it on and use in as your own adventure. Or no, story seeds. That's what we call them, story seeds. So there's a lot of stuff in here that you can use to actually, tell stories with. I think Modifius's mission brief template has really inspired me to include this in a lot of different games, in addition to an actual adventure that you can play through. Now, our future books, we have a collection of adventures, and then we have a full campaign that we're looking to put together as well.
Oh wow! So you're already thinking about the next book after this?
I think we've got 3 or 4 books on the whiteboard, and then we also have a couple of other conceptual core books that use the same once upon idea, but might have a different setting than the realms. So, like one writer came to me and was like, "Well, you know what? We could do like a really cool thing based off of Asian fairy tales, right, or Chinese and Japanese fairy tales." And I was like, yeah, that would look really cool. We could use the old Japanese art, and so like that would be a really cool product that's on its own. It's a once upon game, but it's dealing with just fairy tales from that region. So I think that would be really cool. I would love to do a once upon thing with mythology, like with Roman and Greek mythology type stuff. But like I said, that's down the road. I'm just happy to get this out right now on print on demand.
Hmm. So I know you've, again, you're not a novice per se. Again, you've been working for Modifius for some time now, working on the Star Trek books. You've written adventures. You just, what was the one we did recently? We talked about for a system called a horror system. Oh man,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I did
um,
my terrifying tales from New England folklore for Monster of the Week.
Monster of the Week. That's right.
Yep.
So when you making this role playing game, were there any, like, would you say, challenges? Was there anything where you have to learn or relearn to make this?
Um, not per se. There were things that I wanted to put into this book that I had to convince myself were okay to put in the book. Um, like if you go to the storytelling section, there's a lot of stuff in there that is from like high school language arts class. Like we talk about plot mountains, we talk about lots of different parts of a story. We talk about character analysis, and I, I, it was something that I wanted to put in there, but I wasn't sure if people would be insulted by me putting it in there. And I think it sounds like people are excited that it's there, just as reminders, or because some people might not know this stuff or remember this stuff because they might not have seen a plot mountain since they were in high school. So I'm glad I put that in there. The same thing when I was talking about neurodivergence. I was like, I want to get this in here and give some pointers on how to work with people that are neurodivergent. And I had to convince myself that it needed to be in there because lots of games don't talk about that stuff. So I feel it's important, so I wanted to get it in there. Um, so that those were my two biggest hiccups with this book, and I got them both in, and so far it seems like people are happy that I did.
And do you have any favorite moments in making this book?
Oh man, the the end of the adventure that is in there. I don't want to spoil anything. I really enjoyed, running this through all the play tests and getting to the end of the adventure and having people question what they need to do next. I think was really really cool. Um, I think. Having the opportunity to put in the melodies, which you know, are like songs that characters can sing while you're in the middle of a scene. I was thinking like I was in my Disney shoes that day, and I was like, you know what, this would be cool. We're not gonna have magic spells, or if we do have magic spells, we're not gonna really define them. But in Disney, they always sing songs to build up excitement, and so I was really happy with getting those in there as well.
I was about to ask you that next about the magic, how that would work exactly. So it's not like D&D's like fancy and magic system. It's you made
So
it's its own thing.
if somebody has, let's say you've got necromantic magic, that's a plot device. And a
Mm,
plot device is what you use when telling your story. When you are building your pool of dice to roll, if a plot device is coming into play during that roll, during the narrative that you told me, then you just get to add more dice to your pool, essentially, to make the pool bigger. And so like that's it. Like you can say like I am animating this skeleton and making it go eat that guy's turkey leg. Um, you know, like
mm.
that's great, awesome. That so you get to add an additional dice to your pool and when you make your check. The last thing that I was really excited about was the persevere mechanic. I'm a big believer in partial success or failing forward. You know, Star Trek Adventures does that so well with succeed at a cost, and I was like, well, what would that look like in this threshold system? And so basically, if you fail at a task, as long as there's not a one in your pool, you can suffer a problem to add one success to your pool, which will allow you to succeed at almost any test that might come up in front of you. But the problems are really cool because you build them up throughout a story, um, and let's say your problem is you're demoralized, right? There's also three levels of that. So as you become more demoralized, whenever you use the associated stat with demoralized, your threshold actually goes back up. So your target number gets higher as you suffer more problems. So it really shows you trying to push through, um, some of these hardships that you're facing. And
Mm,
there are ways to clear that off too when you're sitting down around a campfire and things like that. So
mm.
um, I really like that system a lot.
I noticed you have a section at the end called pre-generated characters. It looks like you dedicate a good number of pages for that as well, which is great. Sometimes some books, especially new books, they'll have like six characters and that's it, and which is great. It's fun, you know. But sometimes I know sometimes players tend to be choosy or picky about what they pick, and I'm glad as you expound on that some more so that especially with fairy tales because it could like imagination is endless.
Yeah.
It could be a transformer. It could be
Yep.
it could be a 12-inch GI Joe figure, from
Yeah. I
back in the
tried to
day.
show like I think there's only two human characters out of the pre-gens that we have. Everyone else has this weird quirkiness about them. So I really wanted to show like the gamut of what you could be in Imaginara while you're telling your stories.
Mhm. So yeah, so right now this is out at Drive to RPG. You could get the PDF copy or the printed copy.
Yeah, and
Unfortunately,
if you get the
okay,
print copy, you also get a free PDF, which is awesome.
yes, and unfortunately, my printed copy hasn't come in yet, but yours has come in.
Yeah, I got my five showed up on Thursday, and something that we haven't mentioned, Manny, about this is if we go to this little page right here, if you look down right down here, I think that there's something that says Manny Ortiz right down here at the end. You play tested this at TotalCon this year. You and your gang actually helped me put the finishing touches on this game. You might not realize it, but the finishing touches on the system itself, the threshold system, came from you and your buddies at TotalCon. So I need to thank you for that. I really, really appreciate your insights. Helped me out quite a
Well,
bit.
well, I try not to brag, but no, no. I'm glad it was. I remember. You mentioned this to me, and again, when you first mentioned it to me, I was like, "Wait, you making this?" Like it was just not that there's anything wrong with making a game like this at all. No, not. I mean, I play so many different crazier, weirder.
Yeah.
all sorts of different things. But it was just that it was such I wasn't expecting that. I figured it was be another science fiction related RPG product.
Right.
So
It's
I
so
was,
far from Sentience and Star Trek. Yeah.
yeah.
Bill, I just did an interview for the Final Frontiersman. He said the same thing. He's like, "This is so unexpected." Like,
Well, let me ask you this: what would characters from Sentience say if they were placed in Once Upon? We had these AI robots suddenly appear in Oz or Wonderland or variations of it, how do you think they
oh
would
man.
handle that?
So like if it was the actual sentient robots, I think that they'd be very curious and want to learn as much as they can about everything that's going on around them. What I am curious about though is what would this robots from Sentience's imagination create when they're reading something like Wizard of Oz? Like, what would that
Mm.
look like when AI has that capability? Like, is the vision of the yellow brick road the same as mine? Is it like, you know, I think that would be fascinating to see as well.
Is there anything else about this I haven't asked you about that you wanted to share?
Um, no, I think we got it all in there. The threshold system is built from the ground up by myself. It was originally supposed to be opposed roles. So this book, the game master never or the storyteller never rolls a die, so that they can focus on getting those story beats out to the characters, and treating this like you are writing a novel as your characters are playing. And sometimes if I have to focus on rolling dice or whatnot, it kind of pulls me out of my storytelling essence. So I really tried hard to make the threshold system, you know, just the player's role. If I take the threshold system to another game, I'll probably go back to opposed tests. So, um, yeah, I'm happy with the system. I'm happy with the setting. Yeah, it's just an all around happy, good time with the book, and it looks gorgeous.
One last thing. Speaking of the book looking gorgeous, the front cover, is that an original piece? Is that?
Yep.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah,
did you now?
We hired a guy named Katovic from Romania to do it for us. The original cover that came to us, um, just had the two kids. Uh, and I said, you know what? This is awesome. It's beautiful. I was like, however, we don't get to see any of the little quirkiness that can happen in Once Upon. And so I asked Katovic if he could add some type of character that was non human. And so he went with the rabbit idea from Alice in Wonderland. And I think it really added a lot to this image. The big thing that we wanted was, because again, I want this to be a brighter, positive storytelling experience. Notice how they're walking towards the light. They're walking towards that experience. They're leaving the darkness and the gloom behind them and moving forward towards the light. And I think that's quite different than what you see on a lot of covers these days.
Usually, most covers, especially role playing game covers, tend to be very actiony. And
Hmm.
I remember talking to some of the writers behind Pendragon,
Hmm.
and Pendragon, they could have done like a two knights fighting each other to the death type of thing,
Yep.
but no, it was a very different thing. It was just like two knights like kind of like talking to each other, and which and I mentioned that that gives the feel that this is not just a fighting game. This is something much more deeper, political, and so forth. And with this, same thing as well. You could have you know make this to a like a Mortal Kombat looking turtle versus rabbit
Right. Right. Right.
type of thing. But no, what I like about this because it's like it's it's I think sometimes what's interesting about fairy tales is that it's not just it's not all Wonderland. Even Wonderland is it, it looks everything looks normal. Everything's like a dream. Everything
Yep.
looks normal until you get a little closer to it, and then you realize that something's different. Something's tilted in some way, and that's why
Right.
I love the addition of the rabbit. Yeah, this is a beautiful image, but that rabbit, the light at the end, the snow, you know,
Hmm.
even that even gives a sense that okay, we're living like it's like not we're living, but like it's almost like an invitation, saying that like like come to this journey. There's something special at the end of this.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's I like it. It's very very unique and very beautiful.
Yeah, and the snow. was purely Katovik's idea. It was very, very powerful, I think. And when you think about Lion Witch in the Wardrobe, the first thing they do is they step into snow, you know.
Mm.
So it also has that feel to it as well. And
Yeah.
the border and the little thing behind the Once Upon, Jay Sedelius put that all together for us, and it's very. I say it looks classical, like it's a classical story book. Um, so much so that if I ever do a Kickstarter with this, I want to do like an old school early 1800s leather bound gold foil edge special edition of the book with like gold
Mm.
dusted lettering on the front. I think that would look so cool as like a special edition cover for this. But you know, that's a ways off.
Mm. I like what Jay did with this. It almost gives it a feel like, yeah, these travelers are going toward a doorway, possibly,
Mhm.
but this book is almost like a doorway to something else in a way.
Yep.
It's a very very interesting design idea.
Yep.
Um, Al, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this book. I was very honored to help playtest this. Anything any last words before we wrap up?
No, no, that's about it. I'm excited. I think $30 for a hardcover delivered to your home. Yeah, I think this book's a steal at that price. So you know, go pick it up. It's good. And if anybody wants to you know, go through a session and learn how to play, feel free to reach out to me on any of the social medias, and I'll run a session for you. You know.
Hmm. So viewers, thank you for listening in and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.